Hello, my name is Clare Meyerson, and my talk today is on supported living, a parent's perspective. I am the mother of a 31-year-old man who has autism and intellectual disability. He has been living in his own apartment since 2017, the fall of 2017, so about 5 years from now. So we live in Sunnyvale, California. So that's Santa Clara County, and he is a San Andreas Regional Center client. So people in California will know what that means, but that's basically the agency that's giving us all of our services. So my talk is very specific to my son. Your situation will be different depending on where you live and what services are available. But I hope from listening to my talk here, you will be able to get some ideas of how your own child can live in a supported living situation. So time to share my screen for my presentation here. There we go. Okay. So an overview of how this conversation will go today. I talk a little bit about what my son was like and how we set up for him to get into supported living in the first place and to get an apartment. Talk a little bit about moving into his apartment and then what his daily life looks like. Then after that, we'll go on to, I'll talk a little bit about some principles of supported living. And then we'll talk about, how we divide the work, what really is done by the caregivers and what is done by the family. And then I talk a little bit about supports we have in place, including some programs supplied by the Supported Living Agency and basically training the caregivers. And I'll conclude it with future planning, what else my son might be doing in the future and how that will fit into his life. So basically, my son, again, he's 31 years old. Before he started supported living, he was attending a day program. It was actually two different programs, one in the morning and then a community integration program in the afternoon. So basically, Monday through Friday, he was out of the house from 8-ish in the morning till probably after 5:30 at night. He does have in-home support services hours. He has the maximum with a protective supervision. He's pretty much nonverbal. So he has a lot of needs. So that's why he has such a high number of protective supervision. He really cannot be left alone, and he really can't do any of his own things for him as far as cooking. And definitely needs somebody staying with him overnight because he wouldn't know what to do in an emergency like an earthquake or a fire. So we started by talking to our San Andreas Regional Center Service Coordinator, discussing that we, saw in the future that we would like him to be in supported living. From there, we were able to get an idea of the amount of support he would need. We were actually at that point able to get a supported living agency to do an assessment for him, sort of an initial assessment, figuring out what sort of services they would have and put a plan together. Nowadays, I'm told that they don't necessarily do that ahead of time, but at least you should be talking to the service coordinator so you have an idea of, you all have an idea of how much support your child would need. I also got a assistance in looking for affordable housing for my son. Again, I use the purchase of service model with the regional center. I'm not doing self-determination at this point. So I just more the traditional mode of getting services. At this point, I don't see any reason to change to self-determination because it's working as it is, but who knows what will be going on in the future. But anyway, San Andreas Regional Center was able to get me some consulting time through Housing Choices, which is an agency that helps people with developmental disabilities find housing here in the Santa Clara County. I think they might also do some other counties around the area. So they actually have some partner programs. So the first thing I did was get my son on their wait lists for their basically 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom partner program apartments. And then they also helped me do applications for other affordable housing apartments, mainly in Santa Clara County. San Andreas Regional Center also had me, my husband, attend a 2-hour orientation, and that's required, just giving you the basic information of supported living. So in August of 2017, we were told that one of the housing choices set aside, those partner programs, had a 1-bedroom apartment that was available for my son. And usually when these become available in affordable housing situations, they contact, maybe 4 or 5 people total, telling them there's an apartment available, and whoever gets all the application in and completed first gets the apartment. So you have to act pretty quickly. But so that application is a little bit more detailed as far as banking information, and they do background checks and things like that. Housing Choices, again, was able to help me with that application. And we also applied for some grants, got a grant that was able to cover his deposit and actually buy him a bed. And they also helped with accommodations. Accommodations could be things like, if you have a service animal, or maybe you need a handicap parking space or something like that. The accommodation we had is we wanted one of the closet doors to have a lock on it, so we could lock away some cleaning supplies and things like that. So they helped us with that. And then we also, of course, I contacted the regional center and the supported living agency saying, this looks like it's going to happen. We're going to start services really quick. And then, of course, I needed to contact the day program because, they've been picking them up and dropping them off at our house all along. They needed to know that it was going to be in a different location. So the supported living agency was able to identify a caregiver pretty quickly. And the person met with us and my son and actually was able to help him move into the apartment. We probably took about a month getting settled in and moving furniture in, getting the kitchen set up. But it gave us time for my son to get to be familiar with the apartment, the whole apartment complex, and the neighborhood. Had a chance to check out some of the local restaurants. The very first week he stayed with him, the very first week he was in the apartment, my husband and I stayed overnight with him. And actually the day program had 3 different sites, so they changed him to a different location for the day programs when he moved. So actually the very first morning we brought my son down to meet the van for his day program, there were 2 other people who lived in his apartment who were going to the same day program. In fact, one of them recognized my son from another location that they had both been in a few years earlier. So that was kind of fun. And so the second week, the caregiver gave over on Sunday night. I must admit, I was a little nervous when I left him with the caregiver initially. I think I asked him, 100 times, any more questions? Any more questions? Before I finally had the nerve to leave. So basically, with the caregivers, we have a rotating staff of people. So the caregivers do not officially live with him. They're not on the lease. Only my son is on the lease, and he's the only one paying the rent. He has a 1-bedroom apartment, and the caregivers have a choice when they do the overnights of either sleeping on an extra twin bed we have in the bedroom or on the couch in the living room. At the moment, we have about 3 regular caregivers, but there are some other people who, for the agency, who have worked with him who can fill in if people are on vacation or have other reasons that they can't work. I'd say over the 5 years, there's probably been about a dozen different people who have worked with my son. So there is some turnover, but right now it seems fairly stable and it's working out well. So a typical week, it looks very similar that it did to when he was living at home. The day program picks him up in the morning and drops him off in the evenings. On Saturdays, the caregiver and my son often drop by at our house in Sunnyvale for either lunch or dinner. And on Sunday afternoons, my husband and I, and sometimes my daughter, spend time with our son, and we go on hikes a lot. That's usually our Sunday afternoon activity. Then I drop him off at the apartment on Sunday night. So there's always breaks in the routine, and the fun breaks are the vacations. Since he's been in supported living, he has managed to go on vacation with us a few times. And in that case, the staff is often able to get assigned to other clients within the agency, which is good, so they can pick up hours if they want to. And also, my husband and I have been able to travel a few times without him. And in that case, the staff has been able to pick up some hours and some of the little chores with him when we're out of town. And, holidays, that varies a lot, particularly days when there's no day programs. For example, on the 4th of July, we often have our son stay with us, watch fireworks together. And then after he spends the night at our house, then I drive him to the day program the next day. On the other hand, last year at Thanksgiving, my husband and I had a wedding to go to out of state. So we were out for a whole week, and the staff was actually able to pick up hours with him and take care of him for that period of time, including having Thanksgiving dinner with one of his caregivers' families. Not so fun break and routines are doctors and dentist appointments. I usually try to schedule them for Monday mornings so that, again, my son can just stay overnight with us. And then after the appointment on Monday morning, I can drop them off at the day program. So that makes it pretty easy. So 6 months after my son started living in supported living, I went to a conference sponsored by the California Community Living Network. They used to be called the California Supported Living Network, but they recently changed their name, which is why their website has a different name than their organization. But this was a really good year to attend the conference because they were celebrating their 25th anniversary. So the three most important things I learned from the conference was, one, that supported living had been around a long time. It's been around for 25 years, plus maybe a few more when people were coming up with the idea and trying it out. Two, that really supported living was made for somebody with as intensive needs as my son. So some people say, well, my child has too many needs, he can't really be in supported living. That's not true. In fact, some people who thrive in supported living are people who are not successful, say, living in a group home. So don't think that you need to have certain skills in order to be in supported living. And the final thing I really learned is how integrated supported living is with the person-centered planning. And I know there's a lot that's been talked about at this conference about person-centered planning. It's a big part of self-determination, but it's also a big part of supported living. So actually, this one document here, the supported living services, the training toolbox, it's about a 400-page document. Maybe you can get a copy of it if you'd like. But it is really created for staff, supported living staff, but it has a lot of really good information about supported living. And actually, the last, say, 60 pages of it are a lot of worksheets and information on doing a person-centered plan. So if you want to get started on that, if you haven't done that might be something good to look into. So basically, the principles of supported living is a home of one's own. So the person living in the house, that's his own house or whatever. Just like I live in my own house, my son lives in his own house. Choice and self-directed. In my son's case, he's conserved. My husband and I are the conservator for him. But, he does have some choice in things that he does. It's certainly the everyday things of, what he's having for dinner and things like that. So, but the important thing is that the choice is from the family. It's not from any institution. And he has a chance to make his own friendships and to really be a part of a community, to be able to do things same things that anybody else is able to do. And basically that, it's flexible. The services you're getting are tailored to what you need. What's important and needed for my son right now may be different than what he needs in 10 years or 20 years. So, but we have the capability of changing that as we go, which is important. A little bit more detail of home of one's own. Important to say that, as we said, the person is living in their own place. It could be an apartment, an affordable housing apartment like my son. It could be, a townhouse, condo, house that somebody's provided for him or, owns or whatever, or an ADU. So, and also, the person could have a roommate or roommates, and the roommates could have disabilities like them or not. It really varies. What's really important is that the housing is separate from their services. So, for example, they always make a point that if I decide that I don't like the supported living agency that's supporting him anymore, I can change that supported living agency and he can remain in his apartment without having to move. The inverse is true also. In my son's case, he actually moved to a different apartment in February of 2021. And in that case, we kept the same supported living agency, and actually all of the caregivers that were working with him moved over to the new apartment to work with him there. One thing to keep in mind when you are looking for an apartment, especially if it's an affordable housing apartment, is the availability of parking. My son doesn't drive, so he doesn't have a car, but the caregivers do. And, it's important to note that sometimes they're arriving at night when it's dark out, and knowing where you could park can be important. So if there isn't a parking space set aside for the particular apartment, what sort of available street parking is there, and how safe is the neighborhood? This is kind of breaking news. I heard from the Community Living Network here. The Department of Developmental Services in California is going to be piloting a new program called Coordinated Family Support. So I just heard about this in the last month. A lot of people say, gee, supported living services are great, but my child lives at home. Why can't I do this for my adult child? Have these sort of services for my child while he's living with me? Well, it looks like that they're trying to do that, and that's what this program is. So if you need more information on this, look under, this is Coordinated Family Supports from the Department of Developmental Services, or talk to your regional center caseworker and ask about it. So definitely something to pay attention to. So responsibilities for the staff versus the family. Not everybody has the same needs like my son, where they really need somebody to be with them all the time. Some individuals might need help with just a few things like driving to the store to go shopping, or, doing some house cleaning. But it's also important to note that the caregivers are not the maids and butlers personally of the person. So, if the individual is capable of doing chores or cooking, whatever, they should be doing the things that they are capable of doing. Some of the family responsibilities, I still do a lot of agency check-ins. So with the regional center, of course, every year we have a IPP that we need to do, and twice a year in the regional center and the day program meet and go over his program. In addition to that, we have quarterly meetings with the regional center and the supported living agency to discuss how my son is doing. And that's in addition to some of the generic resources he has. So some of the things that where they look into in the family responsibilities are the most important probably is the medical information, what medicines he's on, has he been staying on them, and doctor's appointments he's had and upcoming appointments he will have. But notice the categories that we have and other things we look into, and they actually match very well with these supported living principles as far as how much choice does he have, the housing, friendships, fun things to do. So some of the family responsibilities here. I make sure that the rent and the utilities are paid. My husband balances his checking and savings accounts. PG&E does have a care program that gives him discounted electric and gas bills, so that helps out. And also, he's currently getting a energy assistance program called HEAP. The one he has is through Catholic Charities in Santa Clara County. Some of these family responsibilities are things that the agency could do, but I've just sort of chosen to make things simpler at the beginning. So I do most of the shopping for my son, grocery shopping probably weekly, and buying other things he needs. I also put his medications in a pill box weekly, so that it's really easy for the care staff to know what he needs, includes some vitamins, of course. And I make the appointments for him and take him to appointments. And I try my hardest to do a deep cleaning of the apartment about once a month. So the caregivers and their responsibilities, basically they're cooking meals for him during the week, and they pack his lunch and the snack for the day program. They take the medicine out of the trays and put it on a plate so my son can put them in the mouth himself. They help my son with his grooming activities. Actually, the U.S. Postal Service has a program called Informed Delivery. So I actually get emails when my son has mail coming to his mailbox, which is really nice. It gives me a heads up, so I know when he has something important in the mail. But my son and the staff usually go by the mailbox and pick up the mail during the week. I've included these checklists that we have of cleaning, just kind of a daily schedule to kind of be a heads up to the staff of things that they need to be done around the apartment. I just have these here for your reference. So we have a daily one, and then we have kind of weekly things for the different areas of the apartment, the kitchen area, the living room area, the bathroom, and the bedroom. Things kind of change over time. In his first apartment, the laundry rooms were community rooms shared by everybody in the apartment complex. So I was usually doing the laundry for him, bringing it back to my house and doing it there. He actually now has a washer and dryer in his apartment, and so the staff usually does that for him. Although if I'm there doing a deep clean, I'm often throwing more things in the wash and doing some. Once he moved to the new apartment, his hairdresser that he'd been going to for quite a while is only about 3 blocks away. So one of the caregivers often walks him, about every 6 to 8 weeks, walks him down to the hairdresser and gets a haircut. So one of the tools that the supported living agency has is a program called THERAP. So this is a program that was designed for people with developmental disabilities to support the clients. So basically, it provides a secure communication. So I can always call or text or email people in the management of the supported living agency or the caregivers. But if I want to send something and have it documented, I send it through THERAP. So that would be things like changes to the schedule or changes in medicine and appointments for doctors. This also is where they store all of his important information, like who his doctors are, contact information, who I am, what health insurance he has, things like that. And it also keeps a log of all of his medical appointments and the medicines he's taken. and if there's anything that needs to be reported that would happen for incidents reports. The employees also have to do a report every shift that they work in the system, and it also has the verification to say that they really are where they are supposed to be at my son's apartment. And the agency also uses a scheduling program. The one they use is called When to Work. So, and I can look on this and see who's scheduled to work when. So for example, on Sundays, he's with us, the work family, from noon until 8 p.m. And then at 8 p.m., I drop him by his apartment. And in this case, Jane Doe takes over and she works with him until 8 in the next morning. And then he goes to his day program. And when the van comes by to drop him off again, John Smith picks him up and is with him through the next morning. Just an example of how that works. So some of the training and orientation I give for the staff, a lot of it is very, specific to my son and his apartment. The agency has been able to hire the people, so I haven't had to do that, and they do the necessary background checks and things like that. I think that if I had somebody that I knew wanted to work with my son, I could certainly refer them to the agency and they could do that. But I've been able to meet with the caregivers before they started working with my son, or usually on the first day that they start working with him. And I'm able to give them show them around the apartment and the whole property, knowing where things are in the apartment complex can be important. Now, if you are starting out with a new staff in a new apartment, it might be nice to, have your initial training and have multiple caregivers there at the same time. It's kind of nice if they have an opportunity to meet each other, because then they can have a bit more camaraderie, comes up with more of the team feeling, the team spirit. I'm a bit old-fashioned, so I still like paper information, even though everything's in the computer with the THERAP system. So I have in my son's apartment a binder with a quick contact list with a lot of the phone numbers and insurance information, copies of his IDs. The best part of what I have is a person-centered plan and the information of doctors. It also has some other things in it. It's kind of nice to have some of the lease information from the apartment, including the community rules. Both of the apartments my son has lived in have strict no smoking rules, and one of them allowed pets and the other one didn't. So that was kind of, it's important sometimes for people to know what the rules are. Now, this is my person-centered plan I have for my son. It's perhaps not as formal as it could be. It's actually about a 9-page document, and it started really as the information that I would leave for babysitters and then respite workers when he was much younger. So, but whatever information you can give to the staff that's specific to your child, they really appreciate it. So to me, it didn't seem like it was as complete as it needed to be, but they were very pleased to have that information. So whatever you can provide as far as this is appreciated. So I had to have coming up with different ways to organize the materials over the years. Recently, I'm trying to do a binder per each year, so that like in 3 years from now, if I want to look back in 2022 and say, gee, when he had that infection in his toe, what was the medicine he was on? I can go to the binder and get that information. I keep this at my house, but basically all these different categories of different things so that I can have a record of what my son does in any particular year. As far as future planning, definitely we can look into getting the caregivers a bit more involved, perhaps bringing my son to medical appointments. My daughter actually was able to bring him to a medical appointment about 2 months ago. So that was kind of nice to be able to have somebody else do that. And also, they do a little bit of shopping for him, particularly when he runs out of perishables, but maybe get them a little bit more involved in that and get my son helping out with that too. And definitely, working on his person-centered plan and just increasing some of his social and community activities when he comes back home. Some of the things, we probably need to look into for my son is, like, as far as I can tell, I think he's going to be able to stay at the apartment he's in for a while. So I hope that works out. I'm not sure how long that will actually work out. But, now that I know that supported living works for him, if I win the lottery or something, maybe I would actually consider buying seeing if I could find a way to buy a townhouse or condo for him. And then, doing some of the legal things and making sure things are up to date on the special needs trust and things like that. So my words of wisdom for people are to become an advocate and start now and continue. We really need to, any chance we have, try to get an increase in pay for the care staff. That seems to be a state level, and home support services always tries really hard to increase the pay of staff. So that's really good. Affordable housing, we definitely need more of it everywhere. And the more you can support that on the local level, the city you live in, probably the better, because they like to hear from people who live in their city. So every city has to do a housing element. So, and that happens every few years. I know Sunnyvale is just doing it right now and trying to figure out, how to make the, increase housing in the way that the state wants them to. So you really emphasize to the city that they need to have units that are good for people with developmental disabilities. And a lot of times, these are the people with very, very low incomes. My son's income basically is just his SSI, which is what he pays his rent from. So Housing Choices actually helps me to do some advocating. So in conclusion, I think my son is happy when he's in his apartment, and he's happy when he's visiting his childhood home. So I think it's been successful. Thank you.